The air went still that first night. That's what I remember most. Not the screams, not the sirens, but the sudden, heavy silence that followed. The world as we knew it had coughed its last, ragged breath, and in its place, something terrible had been born. I was caught downtown when it all went sideways. Chaos was a tidal wave, and I was just a piece of driftwood. People were running, falling, and getting back up with that awful vacant stare. I knew I couldn't stay on the streets. Every storefront was a potential trap, every alley a dead end. My eyes scanned the skyline, desperate for an anchor in the storm. And then I saw it, the old St. Jude's Church. It had been abandoned for years, a relic of a forgotten time. But its bell tower scraped the sky. Solid stone, narrow entrance, and a view of everything. It was a crazy idea born from pure panic, but it was the only idea I had. My legs burned as I sprinted across the plaza, the groans of the newly turned echoing behind me. The main doors were solid oak, barred from the inside, a dead end. I circled the building, my heart hammering against my ribs. Around the back, a small, forgotten service door. The lock was rusted ancient. I slammed my shoulder into it once, twice, and on the third try, the wood splintered. I stumbled inside, into the musty darkness, and slammed it shut, wedging a fallen hymnboard under the handle. The silence inside was different. It was a holy silence, thick with dust and the ghosts of Sunday mornings. I didn't have time for reverence. I found the door to the bell tower stairs, a narrow, winding spiral of stone. It felt like climbing into the past. Each step echoed in the confined space. The air grew colder, thinner. Up and up I went, my legs screaming in protest, until finally I burst out into the belfry. The view was staggering and terrifying. From up here, I could see the city tearing itself apart, the scale of it. It was biblical. The first few days were a blur of adrenaline and fear. I had my bug-out bag, thankfully. Water purifier, a few days' worth of protein bars, a multi-tool, and a crank-powered radio. My first priority was securing my new home. The spiral staircase was my biggest vulnerability. I went back down carefully, my ears straining for any sound. In the church hall, I found what I needed. Heavy wooden pews, choir risers, anything I could move. It was back-breaking work, dragging them one by one to the base of the tower stairs. I built a barricade, a chaotic jumble of wood and faith that no shambling corpse could easily push through. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. My world shrank to the dimensions of that stone room. The 4 arched windows were my eyes on the new world. I spent hours just watching, learning the patterns of the dead. They were drawn to sound, to movement. They moved in herds, a slow, relentless tide. I learned to tell the difference between a distant scream and the wind whistling through the arches. I learned which rooftops were clear and which were crawling with the things that used to be my neighbors. Survival became a routine. I rationed my food meticulously. 1 protein bar a day, split into 3 tiny meals. I used a tarp from my bag to collect rainwater that trickled down the stone walls, purifying it drop by precious drop. The loneliness was a physical weight. The radio was my only companion, mostly static, but sometimes a voice would cut through. A military broadcast promising rescue that never came. A desperate plea from another survivor, cut short by a scream. It was both a comfort and a torment. It reminded me I wasn't the only one left, but it also painted a grim picture of what was happening beyond my stone walls. Days bled into weeks. I explored every inch of my vertical prison. In a small storage closet off the belfry, I found a treasure trove. Old ropes for the bell, thick and strong. A toolbox left by some long-forgotten maintenance worker. A can of oil, a hammer, some nails. It felt like winning the lottery. With the ropes, a new plan began to form. I couldn't stay up here forever. My food was running out. Looking down, I saw the roof of the adjacent parish house. It was a risky jump, but it was connected to other buildings. A potential supply line. Using the heavy bell as an anchor, I fashioned a crude harness and rappel line. The first time I leaned out over the edge, 100 feet above the dead-filled street, my stomach tried to crawl out of my throat. But the hunger was stronger than the fear. I lowered myself, stone scraping against my clothes, the city sprawling beneath me like a graveyard. Landing on the parish house roof was a silent victory. I moved like a ghost, listening, watching. The inside was untouched. It was a time capsule. I found canned food in the kitchen pantry: peaches, beans, soup. A bounty beyond my wildest dreams. I also found books, first aid kits, and most importantly, more water. For weeks, this became my new routine. I'd wait for the herds to migrate away from the church, then make my dangerous trek across the rooftops, gathering what I could carry. I created a pulley system to haul my loot back up to the tower, turning my sanctuary into a well-stocked fortress. I was no longer just surviving. I was adapting. One day, while scanning the streets with a pair of binoculars I'd scavenged, I saw something. Not the usual aimless shamble. It was movement with purpose. A small group of people, moving fast, moving smart. They were using the alleys, communicating with hand signals. Survivors. Real, living people. My heart leaped. I hadn't seen another living soul in months. They were heading for the old library, directly across the plaza from my church. But their path was about to intersect with a massive herd, pouring out of the financial district. They couldn't see it from their angle, but from my perch, I could see their doom approaching. I had a choice: stay silent, stay safe, or risk everything to warn them. I looked at the massive bronze bell hanging silently above me. It hadn't rung in decades, but I had a hammer. I had a rope. It would be the loudest dinner bell in the history of the world, and it would draw every single one of them, from miles around, right to my front door. My barricade was strong, but was it strong enough? I looked back at the small group of survivors, fighting so hard to live. Their fight was my fight. I grabbed the hammer. This tower had been my sanctuary, my prison, and my salvation. Now, it was going to be a beacon. I took a deep breath, the cold metal of the hammer a stark reality in my hand, and I started to climb towards the bell. My silence was over. It was time to make some noise.